Every year, tens of thousands of people vanish in Mexico. Most are never found. And most of them weren't soldiers. They weren't cops. They weren't rivals. They were accountants. Inside the most powerful criminal organizations on Earth, there exists a role so critical and so lethal that holding it makes you more valuable dead than alive. Not the hitman, not the boss, the money man. To understand why this job is so deadly, you first have to understand what a cartel actually is. Most people picture it as a gang, a mob, men with guns and territory. That's the surface. Underneath, it's a corporation. The Sinaloa cartel alone is estimated to generate between $19 and $29 billion annually. That's more revenue than Spotify, more than Delta Airlines, more than Airbnb. And every single dollar of it is dirty. Now here's the problem that no business school will ever teach you. What do you do when you make more cash than you can physically spend? You hire someone to figure it out. And that person, that financial architect, becomes the most dangerous employee in the entire organization. The cartel's financial operator goes by many names: contador, accountant, treasurer, money mover. But titles don't capture what the job really is. Think of it this way. Imagine you're handed $500 million in untraceable cash, and you have 90 days to make it disappear. Legally, on paper, invisibly. That's Tuesday. The process is called money laundering, and the cartel's version of it is breathtakingly sophisticated. It happens in 3 stages. The first and most dangerous stage is placement, getting physical drug cash into the financial system. This is where most people get caught. Cash is bulky. $1 million in $20 bills weighs about 50 kilograms. Moving it across borders, depositing it in banks, every step is a tripwire. Cartels use what are called smurfs, networks of low-level couriers who make hundreds of small cash deposits just below the reporting threshold. 9,900, 9,700. Day after day, bank after bank, city after city. It's called structuring. It's a federal crime, and it requires an army of people, all of them expendable. But the accountant designs the army, and that's a very different kind of exposure. Once the cash is in the system, stage 2 begins. Layering. Shell companies are created in the Cayman Islands, in Delaware, in Dubai. One company owns another. That company owns a third. Wire transfers bounce between them. Hong Kong, Luxembourg, Panama, until the money's origin is completely untraceable. Real estate is purchased. Art is bought at auction. Luxury hotels are constructed. In one infamous case, investigators traced a single drug payment through 17 shell companies across 9 countries before the trail went cold. The person who built that maze? Never found. The final stage is integration, when dirty money re-enters the legitimate economy clean. A restaurant opens in Guadalajara, a car dealership in Monterrey, a construction firm wins government contracts. The cartel now has legitimate income, taxable income, income with paper trails and employees and receipts. The drugs paid for it, but on paper, it's just business. And the person who makes all of this work, who threads the needle between criminal empire and legitimate economy, knows everything. Every account, every alias, every partner, every bribe, every name. That is why they are the most dangerous person in the cartel to be. There's a concept in organized crime called omerta, the code of silence. You don't talk, you don't cooperate, you don't exist as a witness. But omerta was designed for soldiers, for street-level operators, men who knew one piece of the puzzle. The financial operator knows the whole puzzle. When the DEA flipped Jorge Cifuentes Villa, a senior financial operative connected to Sinaloa, he was able to provide testimony that directly implicated El Chapo himself in financial crimes. One man, one set of books, one empire undone. The cartel learned from this, and so they built a new rule, unwritten but absolute. No financial operator lives long enough to testify. In 2011, a 34-year-old certified accountant from Culiacan, we'll call him Marco, was recruited by a mid-level Sinaloa lieutenant. He had a degree from a respected university. He had a wife and 2 children. He owed money on a house he couldn't afford. The offer was simple. Manage the books. Keep everything clean. Get paid extraordinarily well. He said yes. Within 8 months, Marco was managing flows in excess of $80 million. He had set up over 40 shell companies across 4 countries. Within 18 months, he had begun to feel the walls closing in. Cartel leadership was growing suspicious that a competing faction might try to flip him. He disappeared in March 2013. His family received a house payment, nothing else. Not everyone who enters cartel finance is recruited voluntarily. In 2016, a senior auditor at a legitimate Mexican banking institution, a woman in her mid-40s, highly respected in her field, discovered anomalies in her bank's transaction records. Suspicious deposits, structured payments, shell company transfers. She began an internal investigation. Before she could complete it, she received a visit. Not from police, not from regulators. 2 men explained, calmly and professionally, that she had 2 options: continue her investigation and face consequences, or accept a consulting role, quietly, permanently. She accepted the role. She is alive today. She cannot speak publicly. She will never retire normally. And she lives knowing that every financial statement she produces is evidence that could either imprison her or get her killed. And then there's the rare case, the exception that haunts every other person in this world. A financial operator, let's call him Rodrigo, worked for the Gulf Cartel for nearly 6 years in the late 2000s. He was careful, methodical. He kept redundant copies of everything. Not to protect himself from law enforcement, but to protect himself from his own bosses. Because Rodrigo understood something most don't. Your greatest threat isn't the DEA. It's the man who hired you. When he sensed the organization was preparing to eliminate him, a change in communication patterns, being excluded from certain meetings, 2 colleagues who had disappeared, he made his move. He contacted the DEA himself, offered cooperation, provided documentation, and entered a witness protection program that changed his name, his face, and his country. He is, by all accounts, alive, but Rodrigo no longer exists. It would be easy to dismiss these people, to say they knew the risks, they made their choice. But that ignores a more uncomfortable truth. In parts of Mexico, Central America, and Colombia, a university-educated financial professional might earn $600 a month. A cartel's financial operator earns between $10,000 and $50,000 monthly. For families in debt, for people supporting aging parents, for young professionals who graduated with honors and can't pay rent, the cartel doesn't just recruit criminals. It recruits ambition. And then it owns it. And once you're in, there is no standard resignation process. You can't give 2 weeks' notice. You can't update your LinkedIn. You can only become more useful, or become a liability. Those are the only 2 directions this career moves. For decades, law enforcement focused on the obvious: drugs, guns, bodies. But by the 1990s, a new theory began to take hold, and it changed everything. Follow the money. The kingpin strategy, adopted by the DEA and later embedded in international law enforcement cooperation, targets not soldiers, but financial infrastructure. Freeze the accounts, dismantle the shell companies, seize the real estate. Kill the money, and you kill the organization. Between 2006 and 2022, U.S. authorities seized over $12 billion in cartel-linked assets. In 2012, HSBC paid a $1.9 billion fine after admitting that cartel money had moved through its accounts. The bank's compliance failures had made it, effectively, a laundering service. No bankers went to prison. The cartels took note. If a global bank with thousands of employees and billions in legal resources couldn't be prosecuted, one individual operating in the shadows certainly never would be. And then came crypto. For a brief window, roughly 2013 to 2017, many believed that cryptocurrency was the perfect cartel tool. Anonymous, borderless, untraceable. They were half right. The blockchain is public. Every transaction is recorded forever. And blockchain analytics firms have built tools that can trace crypto movements across thousands of wallets and exchanges. In 2020, the DOJ seized over $1 billion in Bitcoin linked to a dark web drug marketplace. In 2022, they recovered $3.6 billion, the largest financial seizure in U.S. history, from a couple in New York who had been laundering proceeds from a 2016 hack. Crypto didn't make money laundering easier. It made the records permanent. The job hasn't gotten easier. It's gotten more dangerous. And more specialized. Former operatives who have spoken to researchers, anonymously and carefully, describe the psychological experience of the role in remarkably consistent terms. Phase 1. Excitement, the complexity, the money, the sense of operating at the highest level. Phase 2. Adaptation. You stop seeing what the money represents. It becomes abstract. Numbers, flows, ratios. The violence that generated it fades into the background. Phase 3. Paranoia. You begin to notice things. The way certain conversations stop when you enter the room. The way your handler changes his phone number. The colleague who stops returning messages. Phase 4. Calculation. You begin to think about exits. You begin to understand that the only leverage you have is information. And that information is also the thing that will get you killed. Phase 5. Resignation or action. Most resign themselves to the role. A very few act. One former operative, interviewed by a university researcher under conditions of anonymity, described it this way. I knew too much to leave. I knew too much to stay. I was a man standing on a floor made of glass. Every day I stood still, because any direction I moved, it might break. Since 2006, more than 400,000 people have been murdered in Mexico's drug war. Another 100,000 or more are classified as disappeared. Most of those people were not cartel leaders. Most were not DEA targets. Most were not traffickers. Many were ordinary people caught in proximity to the machine. Witnesses, accountants, bankers, lawyers, relatives, people who knew things. The most dangerous job inside a cartel isn't the one with the gun. It's the one with the ledger. Because soldiers are replaceable. Knowledge is not. And in an organization built on secrets, the person who holds all of them is never truly safe. Not from rivals, not from law enforcement, not from their own bosses, and not from the moment, inevitable, creeping, always approaching, when they simply know too much. Somewhere right now, there is a person sitting at a desk, spreadsheet open, coffee cooling, doing math that cannot be undone. Hoping today is not the day someone decides the math no longer needs them.